Two friends with a passion for food
Ben and I were always good eaters.
who turned a little Vermont ice cream shop
The lines were out the door from the very beginning.
into one of the most famous names in the business.
We had this tremendous brand equity.
A company on a mission to mix social activism and business.
Ben & Jerry's proved that you can do it, you can be profitable doing that.
Free Ben & Jerry's. It's free. It's the grand opening. Free Ben & Jerry's.
He is the unassuming co-founder, drumming up excitement for the opening of yet another scoop shop that bears his name. He is 54-year-old Jerry Greenfield. This Ben & Jerry's scoop shop in Detroit is the 450th one to open across the country.
Ladies, what I got for you?
Everyone seems to have a favorite flavor.
Butter pecan.
Chunky Monkey.
Triple caramel chunk.
This is a partner shop, a shop owned and operated by a non-profit organization. For this one, Ben & Jerry's teamed up with Goodwill Industries to provide at-risk teens with job training.
This is a way to have an outlet to sell ice cream and at the same time be supporting a nonprofit and the mission that they have.
All the profits from the shop's operation will go right back into the program. It's a unique attitude toward business. One that Jerry's partner, Ben Cohen, takes to Capitol Hill. Ben is here to lobby on behalf of his organization, Business Leaders for Sensible Priorities.
But you're the man.
Well, no, you're the man.
Ben is drumming up support for proposed legislation to take 15%, an estimated $60 billion, out of the annual military budget and redirect it to education and healthcare.
It's our pen. It's a cool pen, you know. It talks about federal spending and how much goes to the Pentagon versus children's health versus education.
Ben walks the halls of Congress looking for a bill sponsor. He has been working on this cause for nearly a decade. Ben & Jerry have a long history of social activism. They built their company on the strong belief that a business can be both profitable and socially responsible.
There's a limit to how much debt you can
They
run.
succeeded beyond their wildest dreams.
Through some twist of fate, we'd become these well-known ice cream guys. And
Respected businessmen.
there you go. Thank you very much.
They were born just 4 days apart in March 1951. Both grew up in New York, here in the middle-class bedroom community of Merrick, Long Island. Ben Cohen lived in this house on Millwood Lane on the north end of town. He had a close relationship with his older sister Alice and parents Francis and Irving Cohen. His father worked long hours, leaving a lasting impression on Ben.
Well, I think I got my workaholism from him. He was the vice president of a direct mail marketing company. He's a smart, hardworking guy, nice guy.
Sometimes Ben's family would drive into the city, passing through the poor sections of Harlem. Ben was struck by the stark differences between Harlem and his neighborhood.
I realized that I'm only where I am because I happen to be born on the right side of some line. It just never seemed right. It never seemed fair to me.
Ben says as a child he attracted his share of bullies.
I was picked on. I was the fat kid who, in dodgeball, when you tried to dodge a ball and you kind of squatted down, I split my pants.
His future partner, Jerry Greenfield, says he too was often teased for being fat. But it didn't stop him from doing well in school.
I was a very good student. I was a kid who followed the rules and did really well in math and science.
Jerry lived in this house on West Loynes Avenue with his younger brother Jeff and older sister Ronnie. His mother Mildred stayed home with the children, while his father worked as a stockbroker.
He had a great sense of humor, and he had a very healthy questioning of authority.
Ben and Jerry met in 1963 in 7th grade gym class. They were running the mile, but had fallen far behind their classmates.
The coach was yelling at us that if we didn't run the mile in under 7 minutes, we'd have to do it again, and Ben would yell back, "Gee, coach, if I don't do it the first time, I'm certainly not going to do it the second time." That made an impression on me.
In the fall of 1966, both boys enrolled at Calhoun High School. It was here that Ben and Jerry became close. The two weren't part of the fast crowd, but had a tight-knit circle of friends. Jerry had good grades and graduated with a National Merit Scholarship.
I applied to several different colleges, and Oberlin was one of the few wise colleges that accepted me into their fine institution. I was rejected from most of the colleges I applied to.
Jerry enrolled at Oberlin College in the fall of 1969, a time when the political climate in America was tense and increasingly volatile. Overseas, the Vietnam War was raging. Opposition to the war was heating up, especially among college students.
I went to orientation, and there were older kids there telling people to drop out of school and start to organize. I hadn't even started school, and people telling me to drop out.
Jerry took pre-med classes and a non-traditional course, Carnival Technique. But it was not an easy time for him. On May 4th, 1970, students at Kent State University, only 60 miles away, protested on campus. Suddenly, National Guard troops began shooting at the unarmed students. After a 13-second barrage of gunfire, 4 students lay dead. 9 were seriously wounded.
You could not be oblivious to what was going on. It was not just protesting against this unjust and immoral war, but our own government was shooting our students. That was a major event for me, that very politicizing.
Ben didn't think college was right for him, but his family thought otherwise.
I think I went to college because my parents very much wanted me to go to college.
In 1969, Ben went to New York's Colgate University, but dropped out a year and a half later. He then enrolled in Skidmore College in Saratoga Springs, New York. He was drawn toward the arts, studying pottery and jewelry making. After Skidmore, Ben moved to an apartment in the East Village in New York City. He used his arts education to intern as a craft therapist at a couple of local hospitals. It was 1973. Jerry had graduated from Oberlin and applied to medical school, but was rejected. So he decided to move in with Ben.
I got a job as a lab technician. I was mashing up beef hearts.
Then, in January of 1975, Jerry met the woman who would steal his heart.
There was immediate interest, I guess. He's warm and giving. He just, the first thing he did was give me an apple.
But a budding romance was soon interrupted.
She was in nursing school at the time, and she was about to graduate and had decided to move to North Carolina to get a job.
That year, Jerry applied to medical school again, but was again rejected. So he moved to North Carolina to be with Elizabeth. But after a year and a half, their relationship was in trouble.
I didn't feel as appreciated as I wanted to be, and I took off to Virginia.
She dumped me. She dumped me. Can you imagine?
Jerry turned to his friend Ben for support. Ben was now teaching arts and crafts in Paradox, New York.
Ben was at a residential school for emotionally disturbed adolescents up in the Adirondacks, and the school was closing. So Ben and I said, we ought to try to get together and be our own bosses, do something fun.
They were in their mid-20s with no careers and no real direction. What they did have was a spirit of adventure and each other.
We didn't have much to lose. We had nothing.
It was something to do. It was an adventure. It was a project.
And we thought it was a big risk in that, 9 out of 10 new businesses fail. And why shouldn't we?
In 1977, Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield were living in upstate New York. They wanted to go into business together, but didn't know what kind of business.
Ben and I were always good eaters, and we thought we might do something with food. And so those two things we thought about were homemade ice cream and bagels.
When they found out bagel making equipment would cost $40,000, the decision was easy. Ice cream it would be. They decided their target market would be college students. They explored several college towns across the country with a warm climate, but couldn't find one that didn't already have an ice cream parlor.
We had to discard the idea of warm because we thought we would be much better off in a place with no competition since we had no idea what we were doing.
Then, Ben thought of Burlington, Vermont. It was a college town with plenty of students, and better yet, it had no ice cream parlor. Now, Ben and Jerry had to learn how to make ice cream.
We took a $5 correspondence course from Penn State University. Since we were really broke at the time, we split one course between us, so it was $250 a piece. It was a good deal. They were all open book tests. We got 100 on everything.
In late 1977, the two fledgling businessmen moved to Burlington. Ben and Jerry combined their meager savings with a loan from Ben's father to start up their business. But they had no idea how to go about it.
We learned about business from these little pamphlets that you can get from the Small Business Administration that cost 25 cents each. I don't know how much we spent at a quarter a piece. It must have been a couple of bucks.
Then they began hunting for the perfect location for their shop.
The place we fell in love with was this abandoned gas station that was 1 block off the main street in town.
The building had good space and large windows, but it was in desperate need of repair. Ben and Jerry had a hard time getting a business loan until a local banker showed some faith in them.
Our local banker said, or the bank would lend us $4,000 to go with our $8,000. His office was right down the street, and he could see our gas station, and he figured he could probably keep an eye on us and get as much ice cream as he wanted.
Ben and Jerry had to stretch every dollar. They asked their friends for help in renovating the old gas station, promising them free ice cream for life.
There would be no Ben and Jerry's without these people. And the place was handmade. We used green rough-cut lumber, which was the only thing we could afford, so we gave the store a very rustic look. We built tables ourselves, we built the counters ourselves.
The work was exhausting, but the results were thrilling. Then, in early 1978, Jerry's old girlfriend Elizabeth sent him a letter saying she was having second thoughts about their breakup.
Within a few months of moving to Virginia, I was thinking I'd like to be back with Jerry. You know, sometimes that's how it works.
When the opportunity to get back together with Elizabeth came about, I jumped at it, and she moved to Vermont.
When Ben and Jerry weren't working on their shop, they were busy perfecting their ice cream.
I would make these different recipes, and Ben would say, boy, it's really good, but I can't tell what flavor it is. Can you put more flavoring in? And I was putting in amounts of flavoring that were 2, 3, 4 times the recommended amounts.
All because, as Jerry found out, Ben had sinus trouble.
Ben has had a problem with smelling since he was a kid, and when you can't smell, you can't really taste. And so Ben was having me make ice cream flavors that even he could taste. And it turns out that's what most other people like too.
After 5 months of hard work, Ben and Jerry's homemade ice cream shop opened for business on May 5th, 1978. There were 12 flavors on the menu. Despite the makeshift appearance of the store, the ice cream was a hit. Within a few hours, long lines of customers trailed out the door. Some days, they were too successful and would run out of ice cream.
They would put up what came to be known as the International No Ice Cream sign. You know, a picture of an ice cream cone with a circle and a red slash through it.
But as the warm days of summer came to an end, the young entrepreneurs needed other ways to bring in customers.
We had a fall down festival. We had a stilt walking contest, an apple peeling contest, a frog jumping contest.
A class Jerry took in college, carnival technique, came in handy. One event featured Ben as Habini Ben Kohini, the noted mystic.
Ben comes out with a turban, and he's carried out by his devoted followers. And Ben Habini would go into this trance and would be laid across 2 chairs. The cinder block would be placed upon his ever-rounding bare belly, and I would lift the sledgehammer high above my head and bring it crashing down, demolishing the block, and it was amazing.
The fun promotions and good ice cream not only drew in the customers, but generated something far more valuable: loyalty from the community.
It began to get people really attached to these 2 guys and to the business itself. It was very genuine and very real.
Still, Ben and Jerry doubted that their little ice cream shop would stay in business after a long, hard Vermont winter.
We said to each other that if we were still in business after a year, we would celebrate by giving out free ice cream to everybody, because we knew that we would only remain in business through the support of people in the local community.
Ben and Jerry's homemade ice cream shop did last a year, and they made good on their promise with Free Cone Day, a tradition that would continue throughout the years.
I liked the idea of ice cream for the people. You know, we went through the 60s, power for the people. Well, this was going to be ice cream for the people.
And business for the people. Ben and Jerry were committed to only using Vermont milk for their ice cream. It became an important part of their public image.
The imagery of Vermont has been an integral part of the company's marketing. You know, the black and white cow with the green grass and the blue sky with the white puffy cloud. It was important that the company use Vermont dairy products.
They were selling lots of ice cream and becoming a part of the community, but their business wasn't profitable. They were just breaking even. For the next several years, they struggled to stay afloat. Then, Ben and Jerry came up with a new marketing strategy.
We started selling ice cream to some local restaurants, and then we started packaging ice cream into pint containers to sell to some mom and pop grocery stores around Vermont.
But they needed to expand their production capacity. They converted an old spool and bobbin mill into a manufacturing plant. Jerry made the ice cream, and Ben trucked it across the state in an old VW wagon. Now, their business grew. They added employees and started to make money. But it was exhausting. Both Ben and Jerry were working 16-hour days, 7 days a week.
Jerry and I looked at ourselves one day and we said, you know, what's going on here? You know, we're no longer ice cream men, we're becoming businessmen.
It seemed like that I was never really getting on top of things, that I was always scrambling to keep up.
In 1982, when Elizabeth was accepted into a graduate school in Arizona, Jerry decided to sell most of his share of the company so he could leave with her. Jerry was burnt out, and Ben faced a tough decision. In 1982, in Burlington, Vermont, the future of Ben & Jerry's homemade ice cream was up in the air. After his longtime friend and partner Jerry Greenfield moved to Arizona, Ben Cohen was faced with running the company alone or selling it. Then Ben turned to area restaurateur Maurice Purpura for advice.
I said, Maurice, you know what business does. It's harmful to the environment. It's harmful to its employees. He said, Ben, if there's something you don't like about business, why don't you just do it different? And that hadn't really occurred to me before.
Ben wanted the business to reflect his personal values.
And it was taking those very strong, progressive values and thinking about them all the time as the company was making decisions. So they were incorporated in the product, in the packaging, in the salary ratios between top and bottom people in an organization.
While Ben was running the company with his own principles in mind, Jerry would pitch in and help when he was in town.
I would come back to Vermont in the summers. I wanted to spend time with my friends, and it turns out the people I was friends with were working at Ben & Jerry's. So I would do volunteer work at the company.
By 1984, distribution was expanding throughout New England. This created a new problem, keeping up with demand. But expansion required more money, lots of it. Most investors were interested in profit, not social responsibility. And Ben wanted to protect the values he'd instilled in the company.
Typically, when a business is at that stage, they turn to venture capitalists and sell off a significant chunk of the business. But Ben has a real aversion to the venture capitalists because he sees them as a threat to him being able to run the business the way he wants to run it.
Ben came up with an idea. To raise money, he would have a statewide public stock offering. The people of Vermont would be part owners of Ben & Jerry's.
It's classic Ben. I mean, he's thinking outside the box. He's not deterred by other people, so-called experts, telling him that he doesn't know what he's doing.
It was a very conscious decision to share the wealth so that as the business prospered, the community would automatically prosper.
The stock purchase price was set low at $10.50 a share, with a minimum buy of 12 shares. The public was urged to get a scoop of the action. Ben, Jerry, and CEO Fred Lager hit the road to campaign for the sale.
Ben, Jerry, and I set out all around the state of Vermont and basically meet with people and show them this new plant that we're expecting to build in Waterbury, Vermont, and get them to send us their money.
It worked. The community did become the owners of the business. 1 in every 100 Vermont families own some stock in Ben & Jerry's.
By the cutoff date, July 2nd, 1984, 17.5% of the company had been sold. The company had $750,000 to help pay for a new manufacturing plant.
I think for the huge majority of people, they were investing in the company because they wanted to support the company and what it stood for, not because they thought they had the chance to make a lot of money.
Ben & Jerry's homemade ice cream was becoming well known in New England. It caught the attention of one of their competitors.
Ben and I sitting around the office one day, and he got a call from one of our distributors in Boston. The VP of Haagen-Dazs was telling this independent distributor that if they continued to sell Ben & Jerry's ice cream, that they were going to stop selling them Haagen-Dazs. We thought that what Haagen-Dazs was doing was illegal. And we did a little research, and turns out, that what they were doing was a violation of the antitrust laws.
Ben & Jerry's found out Haagen-Dazs was part of the food giant Pillsbury, a corporation worth an estimated $4 billion. Ben & Jerry's couldn't afford a legal battle with such a big company. But they could fight in the court of public opinion, with the help of Jerry.
I got a call from Ben asking me if I would like the opportunity to become a one-person picket line in front of the Pillsbury World headquarters in Minneapolis. It was an opportunity I could not pass up.
Jerry launched a solo media blitz. He called the newspapers and radio and TV stations, then marched on Pillsbury headquarters. With a sign that read, "What's the doughboy afraid of?" Jerry presented himself as the hard-working underdog. He passed out leaflets and gave interviews criticizing the company's tactics. Jerry even tried to get into corporate headquarters.
I was received by the public very well. I was received by the media enthusiastically, and I was courteously tossed out of the Pillsbury World headquarters.
Jerry became the face of the little guy in danger of being swallowed up by big business.
It was a classic David and Goliath story.
The story didn't end there. Ben & Jerry's printed "What's the doughboy afraid of?" on pints of their ice cream and listed a doughboy hotline number.
And then we would send them this doughboy write-in kit where they could send a letter to the chairman of the board of Pillsbury, effectively telling him to pick on someone his own side.
Several newspapers picked up the story. Ben & Jerry's simple but shrewd one-man battle with Pillsbury evolved into a brilliant public relations victory.
We have no national brand recognition. And, now we're becoming a national brand because we're getting all this national publicity.
Ben & Jerry's stunts put intense public pressure on Pillsbury. The food giant caved in and withdrew its attempt to limit Ben & Jerry's distribution. It was a triumph for Ben & Jerry's homemade ice cream, but it was not the last time their business strategy or their ideals would be challenged. By 1984, Ben & Jerry's homemade ice cream in Burlington, Vermont was a huge success. Sales now top $4 million a year. The company's achievement was due in part to coming up with unique solutions to business problems. In 1985, after 3 years in Arizona, Jerry Greenfield and Elizabeth moved back to Burlington. Jerry began spending a lot of his time at the company.
Eventually, I was spending enough time there that Ben and the other folks there suggested that I get paid for it.
That year, Ben & Jerry's broke ground for its new ice cream plant. But the company was growing so fast, it soon became clear that a plant expansion was needed.
In order to afford the addition to the new facility, we decided to do another stock offering, this one offered on a national basis.
With the stock offering, the company would formalize its social mission with the creation of the Ben & Jerry's Foundation. It would be funded by pre-tax profits. Financial advisors pushed for 5%.
The first time Ben sees it in print, he says it's not enough. And I think we argued back and forth. He wanted 10, and I think I got him to compromise at 7.5%.
Becoming a publicly traded company would make Ben & Jerry wealthy and finance the expansion of their business. It would also put them under a new set of business rules that could threaten their ideals. By 1987, Ben & Jerry's was a successfully run business. Elizabeth now wanted Jerry to turn his attention toward marriage.
Jerry just thought the idea of marriage was just kind of like, why should we bother with that? And then we went on vacation to the Virgin Islands. And so I thought, well, here's my chance.
Jerry and Elizabeth were married on February 26, 1987 on Maho Bay. Soon after, Ben took the plunge when he married Cindy Cole, a psychologist. The two had met when Ben gave a commencement address at the school where she worked. On November 13, 1988, Jerry's son Tyrone was born. Elizabeth says their son has Jerry's temperament.
They do both have a stubborn streak. Once they've decided they're right about something.
Ben's daughter Aretha was born a year and a half later on July 31, 1990. Ben says Aretha could someday follow in his footsteps.
If she wanted to move in that direction, she could have quite a future in the land of desserts.
Things were on track in Ben & Jerry's personal and professional lives. The company was doing business in a way that Ben felt was socially responsible. Along with only using Vermont milk in their ice cream, Ben & Jerry's decided to seek out alternative suppliers for their ice cream ingredients. When Ben & Jerry's needed brownies, it turned to a bakery in Yonkers, New York that employed the homeless and recovering addicts to help them get back on their feet.
It was such a perfect marriage and a perfect opportunity for us to use a value-led supplier.
Values-led also meant designing products with social benefit. Ben came up with a product that he hoped would help save the rainforests in Brazil.
The thing about Brazil nuts is that they've never been successfully cultivated. So any Brazil nut has been grown in the wild and harvested. So I came up with this idea of making a Brazil nut butter crunch.
The result was Ben's Rainforest Crunch ice cream. The ice cream created a demand for Brazil nuts.
It certainly got a bunch of money going back to groups that were working to preserve the rainforest. It was in the forefront of rainforest-based products.
Ben & Jerry's inspiration for new products also came from politics. In 1988, Ben & Jerry's protested President Ronald Reagan's military spending by launching its 1% for Peace campaign. It came out with Peace Pops.
I kind of said that we really have an opportunity to use the packaging instead of talking about what a great product this is and how
Delicious,
this
rich,
is the
and
world's
creamy.
finest, whatever the heck, to use the packaging to promote the idea of using 1% of the U.S. Defense Department budget for peace through understanding activities.
They knew taking such political stands were risky for business.
Was it appropriate for a business to take a stand on an issue like peace? And there was concerns about how our distributors and retailers would feel about it, and how much of a risk was it from a business perspective?
In fact, sales were better than ever. By 1988, Ben & Jerry's had grown to an ice cream powerhouse, with annual sales exceeding $47 million. That same year, President Reagan honored them as U.S. Small Business Persons of the Year.
We win this national award, which was so ironic when you think about it, because Ronald Reagan and George Bush Sr. handing us this award for being people that were completely opposed to everything they stood for.
In 1990, Ben & Jerry took on President George Bush and the Persian Gulf War. They wrote a letter to the president and put it in the New York Times. The letter was signed by Ben & Jerry's and 17 other companies. The headline was, "An Unnecessary War."
The distinction of it was company speaking through their logos. It wasn't Ben Cohen of Ben & Jerry's, it was Ben & Jerry's.
Ben kept pushing and wanting the business to move more and more in an innovative, socially responsible way.
But that commitment would soon be overshadowed by a hard economic fact. The company began to stumble financially, and Ben & Jerry faced the prospect of losing everything they had built. In the spring of 1998, Ben & Jerry's homemade ice cream celebrated its 20th anniversary. In scoop shops across the country, hundreds of thousands of free cones were served up. What began as a single shop on a street corner in Burlington, Vermont, was now a publicly traded company with annual net sales of more than $200 million a year. Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield had used the company's financial success to create social change.
I'm not sure if there's any kind of domestic problem in the U.S. that the company hasn't given some money to do something about. But we've always said that the major impact that Ben & Jerry's has on the society is not giving away money, but it's integrating social concerns into the day-to-day business activity.
But the company's board of directors saw something else. The company's stock was lagging.
And the business got into trouble. We were still doing all these social mission initiatives, but had gone through some lean times financially. At that point, we were publicly traded. You have shareholders that you have to report to.
That pressure would only compound in 1999 when the Unilever Corporation and Dreyer's Ice Cream tried to acquire Ben & Jerry's. Ben & Jerry's, the little company from Vermont, was now looking very good to the ice cream giants.
We occupied a segment of the ice cream category that's known as super premium ice cream. It's very high quality ice cream that's more expensive than the products they were currently making. So they saw Ben & Jerry's as something that would complement the businesses that they already had.
We had this tremendous brand equity. A large company would look at that and say, aha, those guys don't know how to take advantage of that, but we do.
I think Ben & Jerry's had a unique place in the ice cream market in North America. It was a super premium brand, but in a way it defied all the rules of what super premium was. Most positioned themselves as exclusive for the elite. Here was Ben & Jerry's as the people's ice cream, reaching out to the community, being plain folks.
Ben & Jerry's had a base of loyal customers, and big business wanted part of the action. And the board of directors was legally required to consider all offers.
The majority of the business was owned by shareholders, many of whom didn't really have the connection to the business that Ben did.
The bids from Unilever and Dreyer's were rejected, and Ben & Jerry began looking for new investors.
We were trying to find things to do that would provide shareholder value. It just seemed like a terrible situation with no good answers, no options. And I find those things very difficult.
Rumors of a takeover boosted Ben & Jerry's stock price from $21 to $25 a share. Employees were beginning to wonder what was going on. Legally, it could not be discussed in the company. Ben & Jerry did their best to ease everyone's minds.
We actually had these buttons made that said no decisions have been made, no conclusion should be drawn, and we remain hopeful.
In an effort to save his company, Ben put together an offer in March of 2000. It included Ben, Unilever, and a socially responsible investment bank. Ben wanted to buy back a majority of the company's stock for $38 a share. He wanted to take Ben & Jerry's private, but his plan fell through when Dreyer's made an all-stock offer for the same price. Then, Unilever came back with another offer of $43.60 a share and a promise to maintain the company's commitment to social responsibility. Ben & Jerry were out of options. They were about to lose control of the company that bore their name.
Oh, they just had heavy hearts. It was just a sad time. It was just how everybody felt. It was like, we can't do anything about this.
On April 11, 2000, Ben & Jerry's board of directors approved Unilever's offer. Unilever paid $326 million, $43.60 a share. As part of the deal, Unilever would allow Ben & Jerry's to continue its social mission by guaranteeing that a minimum of $1.1 million would go to the Ben & Jerry's Foundation each year. Some of Unilever's profits would be used for grants awarded to nonprofit organizations.
I think they recognized that it was a big part of what made Ben & Jerry's unique. You look at the most respected brands in the United States for corporate social responsibility, Ben & Jerry's is always towards the very top of that list.
Nevertheless, Jeff Furman feels like it was an unsatisfying compromise.
So it hasn't been a terrible relationship, but it certainly isn't the same as being completely values-led and having people at each meeting that are thinking from that perspective.
For his share of the stock, Ben received $39 million. Jerry received $9.6 million. In spite of the millions they made, Ben & Jerry were afraid their company's values might slip.
Their faces on the cover, and it still is a reflection on us, even though we have no control over it.
On top of that, Ben & Jerry now faced a new challenge, figuring out their new role in the company.
It was a very difficult time, and because it was just such a big part of us, and I think it was sort of unknown what would happen in the future.
In April of 2000, Ben & Jerry's was sold to Unilever, an Anglo-Dutch consumer foods giant. Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield continued to have a somewhat ill-defined relationship with the company they founded in Burlington, Vermont.
I've never asked anybody at the company what they want me to do or what they don't want me to do. I know that I'm officially not a spokesperson. I have no responsibility, and yet I have no authority. Many people wonder how they can get a job like mine. It takes a long time to, get to where I've gotten.
Jerry isn't involved in the day-to-day operation of Ben & Jerry's, but he's watching over its social mission. He often shows up when the company opens a partner shop, a shop owned and operated by a non-profit organization.
Grand opening.
This one is partnering with Goodwill. Jerry still enjoys scooping cones and chatting up customers.
You don't have to try to work really fast. You don't have to try to scoop the right amount. Your job today is to give and receive love.
All right.
While Jerry is more comfortable working at the community level, Ben takes a global perspective. He drums up support for the Common Sense Budget Act on Capitol Hill.
How are you, man? Haven't seen you in a long time, man. God.
His demonstration for the politicians is playful, with cookies as his visual aid. But Ben's message is serious.
And so what this chart is a chart where each cookie equals $10 billion. And what I've got here is the Pentagon budget, which equals $420 billion, 42 Oreos. And
Then, Ben makes a comparison between the budget estimates for the military and social service programs.
we spend
3 cookies go to education, 1 to foreign aid. Children's healthcare gets 5 cookies, about $5 billion. Energy independence gets a quarter of a cookie.
On Head Start, we spend about 1 Oreo. But
Ben proposes taking a few cookies, the equivalent of 15% from the military budget, and putting it in the other columns for social service programs.
what we've discovered is that if you just take 1 Oreo off the top over here and put it on education, over a period of 12 years, that will rebuild all of our crumbling schools in the United States.
Ben proposes putting a cookie and a half into foreign aid, 1 into children's health care and energy independence, and finally, a half into Head Start programs.
Head Start.
Then he goes one step further in his presentation.
Isn't that going to leave us vulnerable to our potential adversaries? Well, you know, the reality is that the country that we currently don't have a mutual defense agreement with, that spends the most on their military, is Russia, and they spend 7 Oreos, $70 billion.
Ben also has an audio demonstration to further his point. He encourages the group to close their eyes.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop some BBs into this container. 1 BB, that represents the equivalent of 15 bombs the size of what blew up Hiroshima. Now I'm going to drop in 6 BBs. That would be enough to blow up all of Russia. And now I'm going to drop in the amount of BBs that represents our total nuclear arsenal.
He drops 10,000 BBs into the canister, the equivalent, he says, of 150,000 Hiroshima-sized bombs. By the end of the day, Ben and his team have met with 6 politicians, and Ben gets a significant offer from Ohio Democratic Congressman Dennis Kucinich.
You know, what I'm offering you is a chance to use the resources of this office as a means of contacting other members. I mean, I'm willing to do that.
That's what we're looking for.
Ben and Representative Kucinich hammer out a plan to build support for the proposed Common Sense Budget Act. Then, talk turns to ice cream, with the congressman offering a suggestion for a new flavor, coconut sorbet.
Coconut sorbet. You know what coconut does to you? It clogs the arteries.
It is a fitting end of the day for Ben Cohen, the ice cream maker turned political activist, a man who co-founded one of the most socially conscious companies in America.
I think Ben & Jerry's will always stand in the textbooks of American business as a company that made the case for corporate social responsibility.
At the heart of it are a couple of childhood friends whose personalities blend perfectly.
Ladies, what I got for you?